Want to bring on our next guest, Julián Castro, former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President Obama and host of the podcast Our America, joins us now. Secretary Castro, appreciate you coming on to chat with us today. We'll start there, just as we heard the doctor describing some of these challenges in rolling this vaccine out. As a former cabinet member yourself, talk to me about how concerning it is to see this process and the transition here between the Trump administration and President-elect Joe Biden's take this long, and what concerns you have.
Well, it should be concerning to every single American who wants to make sure that they and their family are able to access this vaccine as quickly as possible. There's no question that our scientific community has done a tremendous job of bringing this vaccine to the brink of production and distribution so quickly relative to how long these things usually take. And they deserve a lot of credit for that. But now is the real important part, which is making sure that we're able to get this vaccine distributed in an efficient and effective way. And that's going to require enormous coordination from many agencies within the federal government and states and local communities, healthcare facilities throughout the United States. That means that we don't have a single moment to waste if we want to be effective. So we simply can't tolerate a president of the United States who is determined to put his own ego and hurt feelings above the public health. It boggles the mind that this president has not been able to set aside the fact that he lost this election and is hung up on that instead of allowing the Biden transition team to work with the CDC, with HHS, with these other departments they're going to need to work with so they have a running start and they can make sure that this goes as smoothly as possible for the benefit of the American people that everybody is supposed to be there to serve.
Secretary, let's talk about what's happening on the ground as we await for this vaccine to come to market. We've got more than 180,000 cases reported yesterday, and you've got millions of people out of work. I heard you say recently that you believe Governor Abbott should be tapping into a rainy day fund to help the most vulnerable Texans, but you've also got Congress, which has been dragging its feet for several months now, not acting on a new stimulus bill. And then you've got, in the meantime, 3 million people, or more than that, falling into poverty. And so where do you think the responsibility rests right now? Is it with the local government? Is it with the federal government, especially for those who need the money the most?
You know, I had a lot of hope coming out of the gate in this when the CARES Act was passed, that Republicans in Congress would set aside their partisanship and work with Democrats to make the investments that needed to be made to make sure that people could stay in their homes, that the public health investment dollars were out there to combat this virus. They passed the CARES Act. That money got through. That stimulus money helped people to be able to stay in place and get by at a time when our economy absolutely shut down. But the HEROES Act was then passed, I think, in May, and that's been sitting on the doorstep of Mitch McConnell and the Senate for months now. Washington, D.C. absolutely has the foremost responsibility to make sure that people are not getting evicted right now, and that public health investment is there. However, because Leader McConnell and the Senate has failed to make that investment, and the White House as well, that means that the states have to be as resourceful and creative as possible. My remarks about Governor Abbott related to the fact that Texas has billions of dollars in what it calls a rainy day fund that it has been saving for the proverbial rainy day. Well, I don't know what could be worse than what we're going through right now, when small businesses are still shuttered, when many people are still out of work in the state, when El Paso is over capacity in terms of its hospital beds, and they're having to use mobile morgues, 10 of them, and prisoners to move the bodies of people who have deceased because of COVID-19 complications. We absolutely need to dedicate those resources to ensuring that people can survive right now. And the state is not doing that. It's failing. In fact, Governor Abbott and other Republican governors seem to have taken this notion that if they just be quiet, if they get out of the way, that they won't get blamed. And politically, they've decided to take that tack. It's absolutely a mistake, and it's leading to more COVID outbreaks and to hospitalizations and deaths in Texas and elsewhere.
If you're talking about just additional help here, obviously you've talked about a number of issues that need to be addressed in a state like Texas. But if we're talking strictly additional help for unemployed Americans, unemployed Texans, those who need it the most, what do you think is the capacity of the state? Are we talking an extra $600, an extra few $100s? What can the state do in the absence of any federal help right now?
The state can do, I think, several things. Number one, early on in this pandemic, the Texas Supreme Court instituted an eviction on moratoriums. That lapsed, so they could do that again, and that would be very helpful. In addition to that, the state can work with cities around Texas, like San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, and others that have implemented their own rental assistance funds. In my home city of San Antonio, they did that to the tune of $25 million. Could go a long way with more state resources to help more people be able to stay in their homes. And also, this is significant, we know it's not just a problem for the renters, it's a problem for the landlords too. Many of those landlords, I mean, they're not huge corporations. They own a duplex, they own a fourplex, they own a single family home that they rent. So their needs need to be addressed as well. The state could help with that. In addition to that, as you suggest, when it comes to unemployment benefits, Texas, like some other states, could top off federal unemployment benefits to ensure that people have enough to get by. That is something that Texas has not done in the way that other states have done, but they have the resources to do it, and they should do it.
And Secretary, I mean, when you address some of those moratoriums on evictions, I mean, we've been hearing reports that even protections that were supposed to be in place through the CARES Act haven't been held up. There was an Arizona Republican investigation into about 8,000 evictions in Maricopa County, obviously a county that was closely watched in the election cycle here, about people getting evicted that shouldn't have under those CARES Act protections. About 10% appeared to violate those protections there. So, I mean, talk to me about how some of this just hasn't worked as well as it was expected to in helping people stay in their homes in a pandemic like this.
Oh, no question. We have seen instances like the one that you cited, whether it's in Maricopa County, other places in the country where apparently, there's not enough concern among these judges who are adjudicating these evictions cases and allowing for evictions to take place. It just shows you, look, we're in this system of federalism, and on top of that, in local communities, sometimes these things happen. People run their own show, unfortunately, even when it ends up hurting families desperately in need in the middle of the pandemic. I believe that state attorneys general ought to take an aggressive approach to making sure that these laws, these eviction moratoria are followed where they're in place at the federal level. I also think that instead of just a pronunciation by Donald Trump that there would be an eviction moratorium, the HEROES Act should have been passed by the Senate to extend an eviction moratorium that was in place and to address the needs of people who are paying on a mortgage, so that whether it's FHA insured or relates to FHFA in the private sector, people who are paying on a mortgage have some relief. And they're also not going to find that in a few months, their bank is going to call and say, okay, well, you owe us 7 months worth of your mortgage payment. And that a landlord is not going to call the renter and say, you owe us 7 months of back rent, because then we're truly going to find ourselves with millions of people kicked to the curb with nowhere to go and homeless.
Secretary, let's turn our attention to another thing that you've been quite outspoken about, which is the issue of immigration. As we speak, we're talking about hundreds of children who are still waiting to be reunited with their families, those who are detained at the border. When you ran for president, you campaigned on the issue of decriminalizing unauthorized border crossings. And you look at the makeup of Congress right now, it feels like there's not a whole lot of progress that can be made on this issue of immigration reform. How are you looking at that policy under this new Biden administration? And what would you consider progress? What are some starting points, you think?
Look, I was encouraged to see the transition team and President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris state that reinstating DACA would be one of its very first actions, so that you're providing some relief to millions of dreamers, or about 800,000 dreamers who are in limbo right now and have been a target for the Trump administration. That's good. There are other things they can do immediately. Removing that Muslim travel ban, undoing the migrant protection protocols or Remain in Mexico program that has caused a lot of misery. I'm encouraged that the president-elect has said he's going to form a task force to ensure that all of those 666 children that are still separated from their parents actually get to reunite with their parents. Also, that the ones who are here with their parents get the mental health counseling and other resources that they need to get over that trauma of separation, which is very real. More broadly than that, though, some of this is going to depend on what happens in those 2 Georgia runoffs. Obviously, if Democrats win those 2 Georgia runoffs, there's going to be a lot more running room to get good things done on immigration and other things. But even if that doesn't happen, look, we need to compromise. I'm somebody who fully understands that you're not going to get everything that you want, but it is time to reform our broken immigration laws and to replace the cruelty of the Trump administration with some common sense and with some compassion. Put people on a pathway to citizenship, make sure that we improve the legal immigration system, because that's just as broken. And we want to encourage folks to go through that legal immigration system. Mm-hmm. And there are many different steps that can be taken, both when it comes to undocumented immigration and the legal immigration system, to improve it.
Yeah, a lot of agenda items that the transition team and the administration's going to be pushing through here. But you're right. We'll see how those Georgia races shake out, those runoffs in January. Julián Castro, former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President Obama. Appreciate you taking the time to chat today.
Great to be with y'all.